Hi everyone and welcome, and thank you to Mortarboard and to the Alumni Association and to the McKearn Fellows for a great invitation. I was frankly quite surprised. I did call my doctor to see if there's something I needed to ask him. He said, no, you're fine. I don't think you have pancreatic cancer. I called Joe to see whether, there'd be a casket here. He said, well, that depends what's in your will. But thank you to all. It was a wonderful day talking to some of the fellows and to see the Research Appreciation Day. I had, for several years, wanted to see what that event was all about. And I think today's was really spectacular. I mean, Julia and all of the folks that contribute to creating that event, and the energy of the students and your creativity is really striking. And I say just keep doing more. So I did take the invitation seriously. You're doggone lucky that when you get an email from something you don't know, it doesn't go into your spam folder. But something told me to click on that email. And I was flabbergasted to see the invitation from Lauren to present to this group. And so I took the assignment quite seriously. And I will share with you what I think is essential and critical to a successful career. Whether you're in the sciences, the arts, you're in accountancy, or whatever you choose to do, I'll tell you what worked for me, and I'll tell you that 30 years in the business marketplace, there was plenty that I tested that didn't work. And so what I'm going to share with you is what I know does work. I'm not telling you to do it, to try it on the same way. I'm saying consider this, and to build something similar for whatever curriculum, whatever career, whatever challenges are in front of you. This is very different than something else. Let's make one ground rule very clear. This is not about your married life. This is not about your social life. This is not about that. Because as soon as you try some of this on your spouse, she's probably going to say something like mine did. Don't try any of that corporate stuff on me. So it's that. So let the fun begin. So I've arranged this conversation really in sort of three phases. I'm going to talk about and share with you what I believe to be the difference makers in my career, in my professional life. And I got there sometimes the hard way. This is a very thick skull that crashed into a lot of walls and learned the lessons the old-fashioned way. So I'm going to make it easy on you and give you a template. I'm then going to put my neck on the line and do a crystal ball exercise of what I think is coming from my profession, healthcare, in the immediate and near future. And from that, you better take heed, because right behind it's going to be a challenge to all of you who are going to go out and make this country and this world a better place after old guys like I are sitting in a rocking chair. But we're teeing it up for you, and I'm going to give you some hints of where I think this whole thing could land for us as a nation and us as a world. So what's at stake today for today's students and graduates? I have to give a little bit of background about myself. This is the hardest thing for me to do, is to get up here and do a little braggadocious stuff, because this is not in my upbringing. And you'll see where I was brought up in a moment. But if somebody was to do a litmus test, and I chose 5 drugs, I've been part of a great team of folks, and they weren't all the same. They were in different companies. We've probably put a dozen brand new drugs out onto the market. I chose 5, and I said, what are the career stats for these? So it's over $40 billion in drug sales in the United States so far. It's another $26 billion outside the United States. And Lauren shared with you kind of the patents, the research publications that went behind that. When I left NIU, I was determined to be a raging academic for my whole life. After about 6 or 7 years of that, and fighting for grants and writing papers and all that good stuff, I said, I think I need to do something that's more applied. And that's when the frame shift occurred. On the business side, I've probably gotten closer to about $1 billion in raising private equity for various companies. We're just announcing another financing later this week of $55 million for a company that's in the ear therapy space, hearing, dizziness, those sorts of things. But to me, it's not about the money. It's about the medical impact. It's about building things, and building things from scratch where there was nothing before, starting new medical fields, etc. My career stats, part 2. I bet you most of you don't even know Durand, Illinois exists. There it is, sitting like a diamond at the top of our state. It has no stoplights, not two. I think that's still true. It has one funeral home. The population when I grew up there was 800. It's now burgeoning to 1,400. They built a lakefront community a few miles out of town, and that brought in all sorts of riffraff from Chicago. I think my graduating class was 54 kids, might have been 52. We might have had to put some people back for another year. And that's when I came to Northern in 1971. I wanted literally to get lost in a big state university, and I did a fine job of it. And my grades first semester showed it. My father took one look at the grade report, and he looked at me and he said, "You'll figure it out." The next year I did, and it was from there that it was just a different kind of sailing. It was just totally different. I met Bruce von Zellen in the Department of Biology, and he crystallized something in this thick head of mine that wasn't there before, and made me look at things very differently. And then I met Arnie Hampel, and there was no different life after that. It was going to be science, science, science. Arnie stoked an enthusiasm in me that still burns today, and we're great friends. Then, of all places, on to University of Chicago. How I got admitted there, we still don't know, but it happened, much less to graduate. Then it was to Washington University. Then it was to pack up a 3-month-old child, and my wife who married me a few years earlier, and off to Basel, Switzerland with 2 steamer trunks. You gotta be nuts, right? You never visited the place, but you're gonna go live there for 3 years. It was a fantastic experience, and one that we still revel in today. After 3 years in Basel, we packed up with another child who was about 3 months old, Elizabeth, and we moved back to the United States, and that was to work for DuPont in Philadelphia. And that was a great experience, but DuPont didn't know really where they wanted to go. They were good at inventing things like nylon and carpeting, and they discovered interferon, but they didn't know what to do with it therapeutically, and that frustrated me. I wanted to study autoimmunity and inflammation. So I was offered the job at Searle, and to build a group of sort of unparalleled nature, of all places in St. Louis. Monsanto had just purchased Searle about 1.5 years earlier, and they knew the company was very backwards. They wanted to totally reinvent it. How could I turn that job down? So we were last place when I joined that team. We were first place 5 years later, and that was thanks to a pipeline that we helped to build, and it never changed after that. We were sustainably the best arthritis company in the world. We turned into Pharmacia in 2000. In 2003, Pfizer took us out in an acquisition. Now I'm fed up. I have had it up to here. I can't invent things fast enough, test them in the clinic, put them on the market before we're changing the company we are. And decisions are being made about pipeline products that are very valuable to the struggling patient community. The corporate greed drove all the decisions. I said, that's it, I want the ultimate security, and that is to go out and start companies on my own. They said, you gotta be nuts. That's the riskiest thing you could do. I said, no, I can't fire myself. So I headed out to San Diego. We packed up. Our girls were now in college, one at University of Illinois, the other at Indiana University. What a great time for mom and dad to go become hippies again out in California. Founded a company out there called Calypsis. It was a great experience. The first 2 years were absolutely stellar. After that, the board of investors started fighting like cats and dogs, and it got really ugly. I said, I still like biotech, and so I joined a VC firm, RiverVest. We were in California for another year, but the transition was clear. We were coming back to the Midwest. We were coming back to St. Louis for the 4th time. It's got such a nice summer that you just got to live there, right? Humidity of 100%. So we've been around the world a few times. I've certainly seen a lot of business ventures outside. Pharmacia, for example, was 1,600 scientists in my research group on 6 campuses around the globe when I first took it over. Getting those folks to sing from the same songbook was a major undertaking. How do you herd those cats? What I'm going to share with you today is exactly how I got everybody on the same page, and still to this day, those people are very happy they learned what they did together and the challenges and struggles that we took on and that we conquered. First, the personal realm. This is personal of you inside business. Not your deep, dark secrets, not your love life, not your social life. This is your work life, but what it requires of you as an individual and as a leader. First of all, I would say to you, know where you came from. You need to understand your ancestry. your biases, your likenesses, your dislikes, what those are grounded in. It clues you in first and foremost to the filters that you stick on your eyes and ears every time you interact with another human being. And let me tell you, they're there. And I was especially struck by this quote from Nelson Mandela about how we learn certain behaviors, especially that of hatred. And seeing him pass away in the last year was not a great thing, but he was a wonderful man, and he made a huge impact in this world. And I think he's a stellar model for how you need to examine your own biases, rise above any injustice that you see in the world, and keep your eye focused on the goal line. And boy, did he do it. Number 2, you better realize fast, you ain't special. And I don't mean you're not special, I mean you're not entitled, okay? Where I grew up and where this world is heading, let me tell this generation, there are no entitlements waiting for you out there the day you get your diploma. And we'll talk about this some more. If you want to dig into this wonderful commentary from a high school English teacher named David McCullough, you'll find this on the internet. His talk is fantastic. It's right up there, as far as I'm concerned, with the way Randy Pausch thought about life. And he stood before the Wellesley High School graduating class in 2012 and told them why they're not special. And he challenged them to rise above that entitled background that you could only imagine exists in Wellesley. Okay, it's a pretty privileged community. There's a lot of silver spoons in the mouth. I just want to give you a current stat, and I dug this out of the NCES database. 1.6 million students will graduate with a bachelor's degree this year. If you think you're special, how are you competing with all of that? That's what's going to enter the marketplace. How many valedictorians do you think there are in that group? There are a lot. Just know you're not entitled. If you're still thinking you're entitled, I want to remind you of this, the carbon record. There are roughly 7 billion of us humanoids walking on this planet right now. The planet that took roughly 4.5 billion years to form, give or take. We're a relatively late occurrence. You could argue we're special in that regard, but there are 7 billion of us, and that's what you're working with in this world. Unless you intend to live in a cave as a hermit or something like that. I don't think any of you signed up for that. Number 3, be ready to experiment. And literally, like you would try on a jacket, a new pair of pants, a shirt, socks, try things on, try different concepts. In doing that, you will find out what your style is. You know, how do you interpret, how do you listen to the world? Because you do have a perspective when you go into a conversation. You say, what perspective? It tends to be, initially in judgment, it tends to be overly negative. You say, negative, what's that about? It's that little voice that's talking to you right now about what the heck is that guy saying up there? It's usually not a generous frame of mind. I would encourage you to live a life of learning, teaching, not preaching. I would encourage you to have a willingness to be coached and to be a coach. And if you think these are fairy tale examples, there are people out there that have refined these ideas, shaped them, marketed them, and been very successful. Take a look at what Stephen R. Covey did with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And dare I say it, even Tony Robbins, who some of you would say, now that's really hokey. I was really struck some years ago when I read his 6 things that people interact with and find to be difficult as they work with their fellow human beings, because they fail to realize that people work across this spectrum of needing to have more or less uncertainty or certainty in what they do. They need to have a sense of significance. They tend to look at love and connection very differently and appropriately so for each individual, and so on. You see where I'm going in this realm. But this is a very different and deeper understanding of your fellow human being. And if you're sitting across the table assigned to a project team to develop something new from scratch, and you're wondering why you can't get along with that SOB across the table from you, start thinking about this. Because there's no right and wrong here. Everybody's a different flavor. Number 4, try to measure or analyze how you show up. I've rarely been called Prince Charming. I have many times been told, you have the aptitude and attitude of a junkyard dog. You're tenacious, you don't give up, and you're good for protecting territories. I've worked with a lot of people who I would define as polygamous. Oh, me? I didn't do it. I'm just precious and good. So understand what your style is And just be prepared to deal with that as well. You need to set it aside at times. We'll talk some more about that. Consider especially what it would take to get the job done. People are asking you to take on a responsibility, respect it. You may have to grow, morph, and change. I had one coach one time tell me, you need to be prepared to reinvent yourself to the point that if I tell you to slither like a snake on the floor, you will do it. Now, I'm not that agile, but I got his point. Recognize that what you do most of the time starting out is operate from a survival perspective. Let's face it, most of us don't start out in any exercise in front of fellow man saying, I plan to stand up and look bad. You want to look good. You want to do a good job. That's your first hint you're operating from a survival perspective. It's not a bad thing, just know where you're coming from. And again, as I said, if something's that important, what are you willing to do to help accomplish it? If it's worth doing as a team initiative, can you put yourself out of the center of that picture? Number 5, common sense is neither common or appropriately valued until it is bankrupt. I guarantee you this is true. I am a big fan of Mark Twain. He is a man that wrote legions of material about common sense. And I am here to tell you that IQ tests and other things that we use as metrics don't measure it. And if you want to look at emotional IQ, read the work of Dan Goleman. It's fascinating. And I would even say to you, there are 4th, 5th, maybe 6th domains of these things. I've learned from a very smart, capable NIU Husky graduate, my wife, that women's intuition is more than just an intuition. I've learned from colleagues' gut instinct. There's real physiology behind that. And today in biology and in science, we're understanding the physical messengers that actually carry out that little secret code. I'll go through these next 5 very quickly. They're easy ones. And if you want any of these, don't write them down. Send me an email, evilphd@mac.com. I am Dr. Evil. Number 6, curiosity. You need it your whole life. Feed it. Encourage it. Don't let anybody turn it off. Don't let anybody dissuade you or discourage you. The next one is one of my all-time favorites. If you're casual about your business, oh man, yeah, I'm laid back. Guess what? I guarantee you, you will become a casualty of your business. That business will destroy its own operation. It will take you down with it. You need to be intentional. You need to be very much out in the open about what your business is. Another one, if it seems too good to be true, what is it? Exercise judgment and don't be judgmental. And number 10, do be the great sensei. You weeble, you don't fall down. You take on all challenges. You are a teacher, you are a mentor, you are the great sage. You are the Jedi master. Understand your realm, your expertise. In 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, where do you want to be and what mastery do you want to have of your field? Be the great sensei. What are the top 10 for your organization that you're building around you? I had 1,600 very artistic, free-thinking scientists, mad scientists, who weren't about to be told how they should do their business. They knew it. Some of them had been in the business longer than I had, and they were happy to tell me that. So what did we need to do as an organization to get past that and to achieve things that were not dreamed possible? First one is, there is no such thing as brutally honest. Let's tell the truth. If you tell somebody, I got to tell you something and I got to be brutally honest, you're about to savage that person. Please don't go there. Number 2, ask yourself, am I in charm school or am I in the diplomacy corps? Make a choice. I would say what you ought to be thinking about here is compassion. Be compassionate to your colleagues. Be compassionate to the patients you serve. Be compassionate to your customers. I would encourage you to value and to use what I call cardinal words. This is something I made up a few years ago. Cardinal numbers, they have some supernatural powers compared to the other numbers that sit to the left or to the right of them. There are certain cardinal words, and they are things that we don't utilize often enough or that we devalue and don't honor their actual value and meaning. Things like, I promise you I will have this done by next Thursday. I promise you that I will have a breakthrough for my team. I apologize, I did not get this done on time. These are all words that I think we don't value enough and we don't use in their proper context quite enough. Number 4, I never believe talk is cheap. Let's face it, talk is the most valuable thing we give to one another. It's our word, it's our honor, it's our reputation, it's our currency. So if you believe talk is cheap, embrace and reward diversity. Diversity of experience, diversity of background, of religion, creed, color, you name it. We know what it is. Embrace it, reward it, encourage it. Now I'm going to go in detail on a few. This won't be painful. Stay in the zone. What is the zone? The zone is what people like Michael Jordan could find. Believe me, when Michael Jordan was in the zone, he wasn't listening to that little voice in his head that said, you know, your shoe's untied, you know, your jumper's really not working today, you know, you're a little step slow today, you know, da-da-da. He's not focused on that. He can shut that off. Shutting off that inner conversation, which is brutally negative, is the first thing you need to be able to do to be in the zone. It's the power of the team or the collective. It's about an accomplishment that neither you nor yourself nor 2 or 3 other people could do on their own. It's something much more spectacular than that. There are no excuses. Give it your personal best. It doesn't have to be the best. Give it your personal best and keep on giving your personal best. You'll turn out just fine. Invest in the upfront. Declare the result as a goal. It's easy to make up accomplishments when you're looking at them in the rearview mirror. It's much harder to be the architect. There's a blank palette here, and I say, look, we're going to achieve this. We're going to get this done in 2 years' time. It's never been done before. Go for it. Work and play hard together. Have fun. This is essential. Always act as the player and owner, and never, ever the spectator. If you're in the cheap seats, well, I'm here to drink the beer and have the popcorn, and boy, that guy just dropped the ball on that play. You're in the wrong game. You're in the wrong part of the ballpark. You need to be on the field. Another way one of my friends said about this one time, jump in the pool and start swimming with the rest of us. That's right. Don't hang on to the sides and don't sit up in the chair. Lastly, cherish the zone. When you achieve this with a group of colleagues, cherish it. And we'll come on to another point about this, because I would guarantee you some bad news. It will not last. These little golden ages, this cherished moment that we have, they all come to an end. Now, how can you sustain it, recreate it, and do it again? I'll give you some clues. Transparency and apparency. The best example I can give you on this one is, I was always fascinated by the watches. I love watches, but the one that you can flip over, it's open in the back. You can see all the moving parts. Okay, it's transparent, and it's apparent because I can see all the moving parts and how it functions. When you have a great organization, I don't care if it's 8 people, 1,600 people, or 8,000 people, when you have transparency and apparency, you're in the right zone. And apparency is about celebrating accomplishments. We spend very little time on it. If you do a survey in any organization, you say, what's the one thing we didn't do enough of? There wasn't enough recognition, there wasn't enough celebration of accomplishments. That's a lack of apparency. Fight it, tooth and nail, because you can always acknowledge colleagues, and it's no skin off your back. Also, the one thing that we learned in R&D, research and development, where I used to say, well, most companies it's called research and disappointment, celebrate the clean kills, as we call them. When we had data-rich decisions, the most data could be brought to a tough decision, we celebrated that even if it was putting an end to a program. It could be millions of dollars spent, but if the data was profoundly good and clean and compelling, we recognized that group of people and we celebrated their accomplishment. And believe me, that bought us a lot of good work downstream. Usually the next big success comes from a team that just failed. Number 8, build a learning laboratory organization. Avoid the magic leader organization. If there is a magic leader, the one sage who knows all the answers, great, clone that person. You're going to need him for the rest of time. But if you can build a learning laboratory organization where each of you are active ingredients in this, you're part of the currency, you're part of the fabric, that learning lab will evolve and it will sustainably improve itself. And there are some side effects from this one, which I'll go into later, so be ready for that. And this is also addressing head-on the issue of evolution versus revolution. A revolution in an organization is you got to make everything that came before you wrong because you're stepping it up to the next level and you're the right leader. question that a little bit. It does happen in academic circles a lot. It also happens in my industry a lot. I think an evolving learning organization is something totally different, and it's something everybody benefits from. You, your colleagues, the patients, the investors, everybody. This is what I never could handle. I'm not a patient person. You can tell by the way I act, the way I talk. I don't like it. I think patience is not a virtue, it's a liability. I just tell you, as you're impatient, don't, as I did early in my career, don't take hostages. Be a little more kind. In my business, it also was understanding what the patient needed. Go out and invent it. Don't be afraid to talk yourself out of it. Number 10. This one's a more recent addition to the deck. I'm sure you've all seen it. You're in a nice restaurant. You look around. You see two people who are obviously in love or have been married for a period of time, and there's a glow about their face because they both have their iPhones out. I think they actually text each other. What are you going to have tonight, dear? I don't know. I was thinking about the filet mignon. How about you? Why don't you just put the damn thing back in your pocket or in your purse and have a real conversation? The tyranny of ubiquity is, as Bono and the boys said, you miss too much these days if you stop to think. Let's do more thinking and not more, oh gee, can I get that off Google? Now studies can even show you don't retain that information. It's just gone. It's kind of lost in the vapor. So watch out for the tyranny of ubiquity. It's great to have information at your fingertips. It cuts both ways. So why did I bother you with all this? I just spent, what, 20, 30 minutes on this, harping like an old guy? I don't pretend this stuff's for everybody. What I'm telling you is, you can shape your own 10, you could shape 30. Believe me, there were more rules of the road to this in a high-functioning R&D organization, because we as a team of 165 to 200 of the top leaders of that organization got together and said, what's it going to take? We knew what it was going to take of each of us. And we weren't in the survival mode. Now, the side effects, this is like the commercial on TV. Take this drug, but beware. Your hair will fall out, your toenails will turn blue. You will build organizations and leaders that will thrive without you. So if you've got to be the magic leader, bad news, you're going to get evolved away from. This does require your personal best in challenging yourself each and every time, every day. It is not possible any longer to pass the trash. That's some bad news. And there are some delusions that will occur. This will create dreams of bigger possibilities. You will be addicted to doing more of this, and you will do more of this. Just don't try it on your spouse. So, attention, college students. There's a big world waiting for you out there. There's a wonderful book that a favorite author of mine wrote called Outliers, The Story of Success by Malcolm Gladwell. This is about a young man who graduated from the University of Toronto, and he kicks the Harvard boys' butts in everything that he does. So how is it that he does this? He understands things like the biggest misconception about success is that we do it solely on let me start again. The biggest misconception about success is that we do it solely on our smarts, our ambition, our hustle, and our hard work. That's not true. Absolutely can be proven not to be true. What we do as a community, a society, for each other, matters as much as what we do for ourselves. That's kind of scary stuff. It gets worse. There are what he calls accumulative advantages. I would call them cumulative. He calls them accumulative. There are certain definable and undefinable things, qualities, that select for individuals to be in a better or worse position relative to what's going on in the marketplace. There is what he also calls the 10,000 hour rule. And an example that he uses of this is the Beatles. I know the Beatles came before all of you were born, but the Beatles hung out for a long time, more than 10,000 hours of performance in Hamburg, Germany. When they came out of Hamburg, Germany, they were an accomplished musical group. There wasn't much that could fool them. And that's when they really took off. If you look at anybody that's an expert in their field, I guarantee you they put in at least this much incubation time in the pre-work, in the forethought, in the training, in the regimen. And you need to be aware of that. I think it's a good rule. As I've been talking about, no one ever makes it alone. I had a coach one time say to me, "You think you're so smart, you think you're so inventive, try inventing from nothing." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Here's a blank sheet of paper, invent from this." You know what? It's impossible. Why is the US Patent Office built the way it is? The whole notion is to take the work of previous giants and stand on their shoulders and build upon. So if you're in the revolution mode where you've got to tear everything down before you, this isn't going to work out too well for you, I don't think. Let's talk about another point. Educationally rich environments trump different socioeconomic backgrounds. That's pretty cool stuff. That means a kid that goes to the University of Toronto can outcompete the blue bloods of Harvard. Sorry if any of you went to Harvard. That means a kid from NIU can go to the University of Chicago and can outcompete anybody from any institution if he or she puts their mind to it. You are not disadvantaged because you are an NIU grad. And don't apologize for it. Be proud, be a Husky. A web of advantages or inheritances, some deserved, some not, some earned, some not, some lucky, also translate into success. For some individuals over others, there are selective pressures. But success is not exceptional. It is not mysterious. All of these features roll into a nice package, and you just need to be aware it's out there. So what is it? What is it I'm going to challenge you with? I'm crazy enough to stand here and tell you today that there's a cure for cancer out there. Richard Nixon, who went down in history in infamy, declared a war on cancer when he was president. We still have not answered that battle cry. And that disease is killing people off at an alarming rate. If I had you kind of group up into groups of 3, 1 in 3 of you in your lifetime will be touched by the disease unless we do something about it. I'm going to share with you what I think is revolutionary stuff. It is evolutionary stuff that is coming out of the laboratory. It's going to make a difference. And the bad news is, I think you're the generation that's going to have to do something about it. Here it is. I'm an immunologist. Everything in the world to me looks like a T cell, a B cell, a macrophage, a dendritic cell, an NK cell, something like that. I'm not going to give you a big immunology lecture, but I'm here to tell you that several of the things that are diagrammed on this slide are happening, and it is remarkable. This little cell surface protein called PD-1, remember it. It binds to the PD-1 ligand. That's very clever, isn't it? That is a very important interaction, because normally what it's there for is to put the brakes on the immune system. Think about it. If the immune system ran unchecked for too long, what happens? It's not a good thing. So the immune system has ways to upregulate and downregulate itself. But what happens is tumors, wildly evil tumors, can mimic that behavior and can suppress the immune system, can put the brakes on it, and gain an advantage. And we see these patients all the time. Sir, I have a lung cancer patient here. He or she's unusual. They have a large amount of lymphocytic infiltrate in their solid tumor, and some patients don't. Okay, what's happening there? That one doesn't have the brakes on as much, right? Some lymphocytes are there. They eventually may fail because the tumor is able to put the brakes on them. So if instead we give an antibody that blocks the brakes, takes the brakes off, now the immune system will run again. It can clean up the tumor. And what we're seeing in clinical trials, this is happening now from several companies, is remarkable disease-free survival. People are using the C word, they're saying cure, and we're seeing this in multiple tumor types. Let me tell you folks, this is just the beginning of this field. PD-1 is one of these downregulators. 47 is another. If you have a CD47 positive tumor, you're a worse outcome patient. You're likely to die faster than other people who have that same disease. Why is that? It puts the brakes on. It's suppressing your immune system. So it took us a long time to understand the immune system in a way that allows us to appreciate that, but relatively straightforward tools, monoclonal antibodies, can be used as therapeutics. The other good news is we haven't started combining them yet. When we start combining these treatment modalities, the cure rate will go higher. The response rate will be even better We're at the very early stages. So what do I want you to do? I want you to think now about healthcare. And I'll give you the outline, the syllabus, okay? And I'm not asking you to get into a rational or irrational fight about the Affordable Care Act, about Obamacare, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or independent, or you hate the whole thing. I'm talking about the $2.1 trillion that we as a nation spend every year on healthcare. And we basically get to 3 trillion, sorry, I did a Dr. Evil there. Why make trillions when you can make billions? Why not think about that 3 trillion with the whole nest egg, which is the insurance companies wrapped up in it as well? I think there are some people in this room that were born between 1980 and 2000. I dare say, I'll put my neck out on the line again, this is the group that will shift this battlefield. This is the group that will make the change occur. And this is the group in this country that will make it happen for the world. Why? Because this group demands information at their fingertips. They have ubiquity. You have to use it appropriately. You demand results. You demand respect and appreciation. You're going to bring this change to healthcare. You are not going to allow the doctors and the insurance companies to hide out the way they do now, regulated state by state, when you are definitely not fearful about your own information. Look at Facebook, Twitter, etc. You put a lot of it out there. Why isn't your healthcare information that accessible? Why do we have to go through these hypocrisy exercises and de-identify patients and so on and so forth? So what am I asking of you? So I'm saying, especially to the group that's graduating right now, to the 1.6 million who are not special, use that $3 trillion and not a penny more and fix this problem. Make it match the cures. Because the cures are there. They are now there. They are in late stage clinical trials. They are going to happen. It is real. I would like to see this generation grab that opportunity and make it happen. And I want to remind you, healthcare is not a privilege, it is a right. You all have an inalienable right to be treated with respect in this healthcare system in the greatest country in the world. We have the best medical doctors. People still come here to be trained, and there's a reason for that. And as I wrap up, I want to remind you again, you're not special, but you doggone may well be an outlier. Declare yourself to be an outlier and make something happen. In closing, I want to thank my lab partner that I met here September of 1971 in Faraday Hall, my wife Cassandra. Thank you all. Okay, now say something where I have to plead the fifth. Any questions? Any discussion? No thought-provoking moments? Please.
What do you think is the greatest risk that you've had professionally? A time where you thought that?
Well, it depends a little bit on the decade and what was in front of me. I think, initially I sort of looked at my PhD training as a nice academic field. And I was fascinated by the ability to take lymphocytes apart, put them in a dish, and make them still work. I can't do that. I couldn't then do that with neurons, for example. You could barely do it with all the cells that make up a heart. You still to this day can't do that with a functioning liver. So I was intrigued by kind of the mechanics and the biochemistry of what went on in the immune system. We figured out the genetic aspects to the immune system as a wave of change in mammalian biology. That was captivating. But I think that's what pushed me then to say, look, let's try to go in and understand complicated diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. That was frustrating in the beginning because we're treating signs and symptoms. We wanted a DMARD, a disease-modifying anti-rheumatoid drug. We have those today. They have some pretty significant side effects because you're also compromising the immune system. You're punching big holes in it. So I think That's kind of the yin and yang of frustration and motivation that I went through in different stages and phases. If I shifted again, I would say I soon became quite fed up with the big company modality. You know, the CEO, the board of directors were merging and morphing companies so fast that the R&D engine couldn't really even deliver. You know, you sort of got what you got in the sales bag and on the prescription drug market almost by accident. Fantastic drug programs were killed just because of portfolio reconciliation exercises. That's a lot of corporate hogwash for, we're just going to forget about this therapeutic area or these drugs. That's still going on today, sadly. I mean, Pfizer announced this week they're going to probably acquire AstraZeneca. I can't imagine a worse move. I mean, it'll be a $110 billion mistake. And probably the best year in this industry, if you look back at the statistics, is when some of these companies were actually family-owned, family-run. GD Searle was a family-run business. It would have been just fine to leave it alone as a small company. Sometimes smaller is better. And so the culmination of a lot of that frustration was for me to just say, look, I'm just going to go invest in myself. I'm stepping out of the big company clothes. Goodbye, Pharmacia. I'm going to invest in myself. I can bet on myself. And it was the best thing that I did. There's no turning back on it. I think going into venture capital, although some people, you know, still look back and call them vulture capitalists and all this, they're evil guys, they're money mongers. It's one of the most difficult things to do because it's all high risk. It's the most risky investment you could ever make, and it's the most risky lifestyle you could ever take on in terms of guaranteeing successful outcomes. And yet, I tell people today, so how did you get into this? I was perfectly reverse engineered. It's exactly the opposite way to get into the field. But I have the training sets, and I feel very comfortable in that skin and doing it, and it's a lot of fun. Anything else? Please.
It sounds like acquisitions and other aspects of the business, aspects of this industry are sort of intruding on patient care.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you, what routes you see to that changing, whether it be the legislation or changing in trends in management or other factors.
I think the hope comes from patient advocacy groups, for one. We're seeing a lot of small companies address orphan and neglected diseases. And I'm not just beating a drum, I'm telling you that real medication and real progress is coming for multiple sclerosis. We're getting away from some pretty heavy-handed drugs. We're getting into drugs that regulate T-cell activity much more specifically. I think that's a great thing. I think a disease you've never heard of, Alagille syndrome in children, I have a company that's taking that on head-on. There's maybe 2,000 kids in the world that have Alagille syndrome. A company that's willing to focus on that and bet on it, that's a courageous company. This ear company that I was talking about, Autonomy, that's a courageous company. They can deliver drugs directly into the middle and inner ear. Nobody's ever taken that on. I think it has to come from the patient community. I think it has to come from the private venture community saying I'm willing to back those bets, and I'm going to ignore what goes on that big company freak show that's going to just play itself out regardless of anything we can do. That's macroeconomics. I'm talking microeconomics. I think the other place that I've hoped it would come from is the shareholder, but I can tell you, after 20 years of merger mania, I haven't seen the pressure come from the employee base. They're victims. They have no voice in this. It's not coming from the shareholder, and that escapes me. If you add up the cumulative market cap of every company that Pfizer has purchased in the last 15 years, they should be much more valued on the stock exchange. It's been negative. It's not accretive. It's negative to them. So I don't understand why the board of directors approves these things and continues to engage in this drunken behavior. I think it's going to have to come from the patient advocacy groups and from our society. Please.
So this cure for cancer that you mentioned, when do you expect that to be available on the market?
Well, if you're in these clinical trials, you're going to benefit now. I think we're going to see some approvals in the PD-1 field here shortly. I mean, it could be another year, I think. They're certainly on the fast track. FDA is really cooperating on this. They want to see this happen. But the full value of that platform will be played out over time. There's still a lot more to be done because you want to, remember everything in oncology, you kind of mix and match. If I can add some of this to it and get a little more giddy up in the treatment, then I do it. And I think that's what we have yet to see here. That's where profoundly strong results are going to come from. We're seeing great results now in so-called monotherapy and salvage patients. These are end-stage patients that are being rescued. Imagine when we go in earlier in the disease, intervene at a point when the immune system is still relatively intact and robust, And we're combining it with other modalities such as this, other take the brakes off. Your CD47 is a don't eat me signal the tumor can put out there so that the macrophages don't come in and gobble up the tumor. So that's how it escapes. Block CD47 with an antibody, combine it with PD-1, see what you get. It should be non-toxic. It should be highly effective. We know what these antibodies will do as therapies. And we also know what they won't do. So I think that's kind of the horizon you're going to see. Now comes the question that we're battling right now. We already have this precedent in front of us of how our society reacts to this. Oh my God, what's it going to cost? What's that going to do to my insurance premium? Well, you know what? You ought to get past that question. Because right now, a company called Gilead has a drug out there that, guess what, is a 96% cure rate for hepatitis C. Hepatitis C is a pretty big problem in this country. If you look at its total economic healthcare burden, it's very substantial. So what happens? Well, the insurance companies don't want to pay for that expensive pill. They want to put you on an old line therapy that's got a lot of toxicity because it's cheap. And then a company like Express Scripts, the prescription benefit manager company par excellence in St. Louis, Missouri, gets behind this and says, we're going to crush the payment schedule for these drugs. We don't want these in the marketplace. We're not going to reimburse. Well, Gilead just did an earnings release today. I just picked up the news coverage on it. And guess what? That drug is selling way beyond everybody's expectations. Now the analysts need to add another $1 billion to the revenue. You know what I say to that company? Good work. Keep going. Yes, bring the prices down. Give patient discounts. Give coupons to support needy patients, patients in need. But are you going to deny a curative drug to this society purely on an economic argument? I think that's ridiculous. And I don't like to put numbers on human life, what it's worth. I think that's a specious argument. I say let's just work together and see what we can accomplish, because there are ways to work it out. Please.
Being an individual that was born in that window from 1980 to 2000 and hearing your passion for healthcare and the monumental changes that are coming in that time window, are there any lateral industries that you see keeping up to the healthcare industry?
Yeah, I think if you understood the prescription drug supply chain, you tech-savvy millennials would get your hackles up and you would invent some things that take a lot of the inefficiency, and that includes the monitoring from groups like the FDA, and really bring it to a modern standard. I think what's beginning to happen with electronic health records is a good step. It's a faint start. Once the iWatch comes out and we actually have a device that'll measure blood pressure, I mean, the problem with all these gadgets, you got your fuel Nike fuel band on, you got all your pedometers and all this stuff. It's not measuring blood pressure, it's not measuring vital signs. Once vital signs become digitized and electronically accessible between you and your doctor or whoever you're assigning as your caregiver, your priest, whoever, your rabbi, then things are going to change. And I think millennials should push for that. You're going to require your medical information to be handled a lot like you deal with Twitter and Facebook. I'm not trivializing it, but it should be aggregated. You should be able to use it. Imagine as your generation ages, imagine as your lower back starts to hurt as much as mine does, you're going to get pretty fussy about stuff. You're going to require that your treating physician can get you that prescription drug or get you a physical therapy appointment or whatever, and you're not going to want to wait in the queue for an appointment. That's just plain stupid. You want to be able to push a button, dial up or whatever, and connect to your physician and say, here I am, see, this is where it hurts, here, I'm doing this, now what do you say? And I say you deserve that. Another place that I think a lot of inefficiency will come out is how we actually do prescribing and fulfillment of that prescription. Express Scripts is using a very old-fashioned rubric to take a few pennies out of each transaction that occurs. They're making billions of dollars, and I'm not villainizing them. They're growing at a 20% compound annual growth rate. That's pretty phenomenal growth. So there's money in them there hills. And I say smart people like you ought to get in there and figure out even better ways to do this. You ought to get ahead of the problem and fix it. Because if you understood how many hands touch a pill before it reaches your mouth, you would be horrified to know how much inefficiency there is in that system, how regulated it is. Now I understand it needs to be pure, it needs to be what we say it is. We don't want counterfeiters in the supply chain. But there's a lot of inefficiency in that system and we need to take it out. Healthcare services, there's another one. The major amount of spending, if you go to a mall and say, you know, just to the old timers walking around there, how much of your dollar, your healthcare dollar, is spent on prescription drugs? Oh, it's outrageous. I hate those companies. They're just, they're manipulative. You know what it is? It's just a little bit more than 10 cents of your dollar. Look at healthcare services. All those hover rounds and all the diabetes care and everything. Some of that's very inefficient. It's very corrupt business practice. That's a major piece of that dollar. We need to change that. It doesn't matter who you vote for. Just change it. Hold them accountable. Why does Congress have free health care after a while? That needs to change. It's good for them. It's bad for you. Throw the bums out. You.
You mentioned earlier about the difference between sort of evolution and revolution, and how revolution is not necessarily acceptable, but how do you reconcile that with how sort of grim the current situation is?
How grim the current situation is?
Yeah.
Oh, look, I think change is essential. Change is vital. This is all about, group change, group power. It's more about wisdom. As you go around a table of scientists or technocrats in a field, you say, how should we solve this problem? Well, this problem's never been handled before, so there's not some book I can go to. I can't Google it and find the answer. We're gonna have to solve it here. Would I rather have the power of that collective wisdom around the years of experience? If you add up, you go, wow, we got 200 years of experience right here. We ought to be able to solve this thing. So I think that's part of what I say, the difference of evolution versus revolution. Don't be afraid to declare something broken. I'm not saying, life of soft talk here, tread on tulips. I'm not saying that at all. If something's busted, speak out clearly, but do it from a perspective of compassion and of finding a solution and bringing a solution to the table. Be a part of the fix. Don't just be a spectator. Oh, that's your problem. You need to fix that. Your world is broken. So there's, unfortunately, there's a tremendous amount we can grapple with in the healthcare system alone. I think we could talk about other fields. I don't think healthcare is necessarily the only one that's broken in this country by any means. But it's a good one to tackle. We certainly like to crab about it. And as you get older and your bones start to ache, you'll get interested in this field a lot more. It'll become highly personal. And look, God bless you. I hope you have long, productive, lives, and these diseases don't cut you short. You see horror stories every day with somebody coming down with an early onset disease, an autoimmune disease, a cancer, something like that. We need to have medicines that really effectively treat those conditions and get those people back in productive lives. Anything else bugging you? Christian.
Okay, so a lot of us are having conversations with graduating seniors, and they're about to embark on something. And a lot of them ask or inform us, or people that they seek advice from, well, I think I'm just going to bum around for a year. And not maybe go back into graduate school or go directly into whatever their passion is. They just want to take a break, so to speak. I've been in school for 4 or 5 years, I just want to take a break. What's your advice to those students?
I'll tell you the same thing I decided for myself. Do it. So I had to face a decision in my senior year here. Do I want to cram a few more hours into my last 2 semesters and graduate in June, which would have been on schedule, or do I want to spend a summer here, do a better job on my courses, and probably better grades as a result? And I had never spent a summer in DeKalb. I'd never done it. I was always curious what it's like. So I did it. It was a great thing. And I'm telling you, this is one of the reasons we do the Summer Fellows program, because I want kids to be able to step away from, I got to go get that job. And, if I earned $3,000 in a summer, I had money left over to fund my whole school year. As my lovely wife found, digging through some archives a couple of weeks ago, we had the promotional brochure for recruiting students to NIU for the class of 1971, right? The freshman class 71. Do you know how much the full year of NIU cost at that point? And this included a healthcare coverage plan, total healthcare coverage plan. So this is housing, books, tuition, everything, room and board, a little bit of spending money, a whopping sum of $2,000. Now, if you take the time value of money, that's about $14,000 in today's currency. How much are you paying for a full year here? You're paying more than $14,000. So it was a valuable decision for us to say, let's give kids a summer experience here where they don't have to worry about the checkbook. And let's see what they can do with it in thinking about where their career goes thereafter. And that's what we're learning from now. This is an experiment. I told Joe, this is an experiment. I'm going to treat this just like one of my companies in that regard. This is a test tube. Don't take it the wrong way. We're generating the data, and it's helpful. So if you need that gap year, I say do it. I left here after the summer. I went to University of Chicago and interviewed, and Don Rowley and Frank Fitch ran the Department of Immunology. And Rowley was this wonderful guy. He just passed away about a year and a half after a very long, rich life. And he sort of reminded me a lot of Vince Lombardi, if you like football, if you're a Green Bay Packer fan ever. And he had this sort of alligator smile, but he was gregarious. And he said to me, kid, you don't know what the hell you want to do in life, so why don't you just put on a lab coat, go in the lab, and learn to do some experiments. Well, Arnie Hampel had taught me how to do that. So I did it for a semester. And then by the end of that, I was applying to grad school, and it was smooth sailing afterwards. That gap period was invaluable for me because it gave me more perspective on what I really wanted to do. I knew at that point I wanted to pursue the PhD program. I had the certainty to do it. And I think if you need to do that, you need to sort it out, and by all means, do it. What's good for the goose is good for the gander here. You know, it's a good example. If it's not good for you, don't do it. Whatever works best for your career plan. But part of what we're trying to do too is to take the ivory tower aspect out of the NIU experience. You got over 200,000 accomplished alumni right here in your backyard. How do we get that experiential set, that experience, that richness of advice and contact and input in your back pocket as a student? And one of the McKearn Summer Fellows last year asked, I think it was Dave Hewson at the Mac Club, the etiquette training that Joe put together, which I laughed at when he first told me the idea. It was an ingenious thing to do. One of the students asked Dave, did you know you were going to be this successful when you were in NIU? Dave laughed. He said, I had no clue what I was going to do. Okay, so that's the perspective. Let's take the walls down. Let's make it happen. Let's bring that experience set here to DeKalb, make it easier to access, make us a resource to you in career choice and going out into the world. So gaps are good. If you need it, do it. Thank you. You were a lovely audience. If you have any other questions, I don't want to cut it short. But if your tummies are rumbling and you want to go have dinner, dinner's on Joe.